basically what it is that you're taking individual perspectives from lots of different people, and you're encouraging these diverse thoughts and ideas to create these choices, to explore the opportunities. That's that divergence that happens. And then when you come together, you're looking at these ideas and finding themes and patterns and similarities. Now, on a small scale, that convergence and divergence can happen within a particular exercise, or within, it can happen within even discussions. But if we zoom out holistically in that double diamond, like, it happens on a bigger scale as well. When you're looking to discover lots of different things, do research, and then you're trying to define what it is you're looking to hone in on, develop, and come up with lots of different ideas and then deliver it. Now, I guess why I'm raising this is because we looked at this concept and managed to ingrain ingrain it in the methods to be able to allow for remote work to be super efficient and collaborative and still be effective. Now, following on this is this allows for a number of things. One, it empowers everyone to express their thoughts and ideas regardless of personality type. So you don't have someone, especially on a Zoom call, talking over another person and trying to share their ideas. Everybody's able to individually look at an idea and express it and put it down. It's super inclusive and super inclusive as well. So if you're shy, you can't really talk about something, you can actually put these things down and allow for your ideas to shine. Which brings me to my next point. The focus becomes the ideas themselves and the thoughts rather than the people that created them. So in remote design sprints, you're looking at the whiteboard, and which we'll touch on a lot later on. And so when you're having this organized way of organized structure or process of putting together these thoughts and ideas, it makes it easy to find and understand and see direction. Which brings me to my last point. It creates alignment and direction with the team through this collaborative synthesis of thoughts and ideas. So yeah.
Awesome. So now moving on into preparing for the workshop, like before the workshop itself, there are a couple of things that we would as facilitators will need to prepare before it. So here are a couple of things that we'll go through. So understanding the why, getting the right people in this workshop, list out an agenda to get it started, and also keeping your boards ready. And lastly, making sure the comms are sent out. First on, I'll go into understanding the why. So for us as facilitators, it's from my point of view, I think understanding the why is usually the first step to moving forward to solving any sort of problem. And knowing the why will actually help motivate you or others to understanding why am I actually doing this. But more importantly, as a facilitator, you need to understand why are you actually running this design sprint? What is the goal that you want to achieve? And what are the questions that you actually want to get answered? And who can actually help you answer it? Which brings me to my next slide is getting the right people. So getting the right people in a room, whether it's a Zoom room, a remote meeting, or even just an in-person meeting, we have they are the same challenges there as well. You would have conflicts in schedule with the current situation where everyone's kind of remote. Some of us might actually be experiencing remote meeting fatigue, right? Joining too many meetings, attending too many meetings, right? But what I want you to get out from this is you don't always need everyone in the room, but at least gather your perspective. If you're working on a feature that involves terms and condition, you might want to reach out to your legal team, right? If there's a bug fix, you might want to reach out to your support team and investigate further. So even if you can't get all the people in the room, you would still want to get your perspective and your information and then present it back during this design sprint. Following that, it'll be best to plan the sprint, following the GB sprint kind of timetable. You have this kind of a 5-day kind of sprint, but it doesn't matter because a lot of the time companies don't really have the resources to give you five days to work on this. So sometimes you might actually squish it into 4, 3, I've even been into a couple which is like squished into one day, and it really depends. And another thing is actually like to list out the exercise, having a clear outcome and time boxes. Time box it. Time boxing is a pretty important point with this whole design sprint, where you constrain yourself to a limit of time so that this allows you to focus on like delivering an outcome, right? And moving on to like, how do you facilitate those like different exercises that goes along the like during these days? So first, I'm going to touch on two main umbrella of like tools. So first one would be communication. So obviously, like you've been in this one, which is Zoom, and there's a lot of other like collaboration tools, like communication tools that allows you to collaborate, like Microsoft Teams, which is also getting really big, and with the Slack as well. Like a lot of us might be using Slack, and there are just heaps of them for us to keep us in sync in terms of like communication. And with this video, making sure like we can see each other, engage like the look. And this is a very important part, which is the virtual whiteboard. So during design sprints, what we usually kind of do is like gather a bunch of people into a room, and then we have like sticky notes along the way, and also like butcher paper. What this virtual whiteboard is essentially that room. So depending on the tool that you choose, like there are a lot of different features that comes into each one of those tools. So here are just some of them. I'm just listed them out, like which are quite popular. The presentation that we're doing on right now, that myself, Daniel, and Hans built out just a Miro all together at the same time, just in real-time collaboration. And really doesn't matter what tool you use, it just needs to empower people to do real-time collaboration, and so that they could just all join in. And talking about Miro and boards.
All right. So yeah, having your boards locked and loaded are super, super important. Making sure that they're all prepped out. So this is what a prepped out board might look like for your design sprint. So as you can see here at a high level, the clear challenge of what it is that everybody is looking to solve. And then you have your boards laid out in the days. So it's easy for people, as soon as they open up their Miro board, they know exactly what day 1 is, day 2, or day 3, and where they're starting. If we zoom in a little bit on that, we see that like in each of the boards, you've got arrows to direct them on where the next activity will go to. So, an example that you see here, hey, everyone start here. This is day 1. And from the boards, or you're looking at Miro, by the way, if you guys don't know. And here we're doing long-term goals, fears, assumptions, and questions on day 1. If we zoom in a little bit more, then we see in each of the actual boards, you've got space around it, which I'll touch on a little bit on how that applies to that converging and diverging thinking principle that we've ingrained in doing remote design sprints. You've got some of the stationery, a clear headline of what that is, and also what the project is for. Now, touching on stationery, like how you would prep, everything else in a normal workshop, when it comes to the remote stuff, you're actually creating it and making sure that all the assets that you need to do your activities are there. Now, luckily, with Miro, they've got Post-its already where you can, drag and drop. If you need colors or specific colors that you're doing for an evaluation activity like Rosebud Thorn, lay that out already. Miro's got like this voting function built in, but sometimes, you like to see the votes on the artifact itself, so you'll have to create those. And then, and it's all about being prepped. One thing with stationery though, that, that's sort of like a nuance, is beware of the order. You know how there are layers in between different things. If you have a sticker dot that you've created first and a Post-it on top of it, people won't be able to see the sticky dot on the Post-it because it's underneath it. So beware of the order of your assets, and make sure everybody's clear on how to use them. And last but not least, lock your boards. Like, I've been in so many, remote workshops where all my boards are, despite the whole you prepping it and organizing it, someone will move them. you will find like you're putting out some fires as you're going through and when people are doing their exercise. So make sure you lock the boards and the things that you don't want people moving around, and then you only open up the elements that you want people to be moving around for. So that's that. All right.
Awesome.
Now that everything is all set up, here's an overview. Let's get straight into it. So,
Yep.
oh, sorry, with comms, yes.
Yeah. So just before like going into the overview, so we got this, like I was talking about, like preparing for the workshop. Don't forget to send out those calendar invites, like to make sure like that slot is blocked out for that person. And even also like doing a reminder a day before would be great as well, just to make sure like they're still interested or still have the time available to join you. As mentioned, as Hans mentioned, like any stationery required, but there's a little bit more on the stationery is like preparing paper and pen, because depending on the virtual whiteboard tool that you have chosen, some of your participants might not be very comfortable using it or have not used it before. So if they want to use paper and pen, which is still fine, might just be good to remind them of preparing it. And any tools that is required to be downloaded, for example, Zoom or whatever tools that they need. Account logins, which is also very important. Like if they don't have a login access, like it would be great, like just to get them to reach out to you, or you as a facilitator knowing that person, making sure like they are on the platform as well as a team. And also like including the sprint goal. What are we trying to achieve out of this? Depending on like, is it multiple days or is it just one day? Like what is the sprint goal that we want to achieve out of this? All including in just one email, just to make sure like everyone is aligned before coming in.
All right, so getting straight into it. Now that everything's all prepped, you're ready to do the actual design sprint. Now here's a quick snapshot overview of what we'll be going through and how to actually do these exercises. So on day one, we've got long-term goals, fears, assumptions, questions, and there could be an empty map solution in there to be able to make sure your participants know exactly who they're creating the solutions for and what the problems that they face, what's important to them. Day two is all about journey mapping and creating triggers about how you can, through How Might We, is about how you can ideate solution. And then following that will be Crazy Eights and solution sketches. The art museum through evaluating these ideas, and also story mapping to be able to start fleshing out these solutions and turn them into a prototype. Following that leads on to day four, which is prototyping. That's usually spent about one whole day making sure that's all prepped and created and ready to go. Then lastly, user testing on day five. All right, is everybody ready? Let's get straight to it. So day one. Now, on the day of the actual sprint, the first day of the sprint, you want to make sure you at least have some sort of icebreaker in there. It's important when it comes to going through a creative journey or creative endeavor, you create a sense of play in the mindset of the people that are working in these activities. You want to be able to, make them feel like there are possibilities and we've got to break away with some of the things that we're used to. So having some sort of icebreaker helps with that. It creates some sort of high energy that you would normally find in person. Doing it remotely, it's hard to sustain and maintain that. So at least starting off sets the tone right. A clear example that we'll show is somewhat like an easy one, the superhero challenge. So you just quickly ask, what's your superhero name? What's your superpower? And how are you going to change the world? And people, different people will have different thoughts on how to tackle this, but it's a good way to, sort of break and break the ice and start the mood right. Once that's all done, introduce the sprint challenge. Make sure that it's super, super clear with all the participants of what they're actually looking to solve and why. What outcome are we trying to gain from doing this design sprint? And be clear on that bigger challenge of what we're solving. Take the time to ask and clarify some of the questions. When the executives are, if you have executives there, they'll be able to provide some context on that business side of where we're trying to get to and why. And this helps really align of what constraints that we might have or what it is that we're looking to focus on. Now, once that's super clear, it's time to head straight to the long-term goals. Now, the long-term goals is all about starting with the end in mind. Like, what does success look like? You know, individually from each person, you want to gain their perspective and understanding about this in order to be able to, like I said, you know, create these choices and then find these different diverse thoughts and ideas and then come back and align towards a clear direction based on these different individual perspectives. What does that actually look like? How do we do this converging and diverging thinking about a particular topic, say long-term goals? So here we'll show you here right now. So the first step, you have your board, right? You've got in the middle your board and you've got these stickies around it. Now, individually, people are creating individual, their individual long-term goals of what they think success looks like. And as they keep going, they'll have more and more sticker dots that they're creating about what they think long-term goals are. And then they'll add it in, and once that's all done, it's usually time box, for example. You know, so the start of this is all about time boxing. Okay, individually, what are your long-term goals? What do you think the success outcomes are? Time box that in about, you know, 10, 15 minutes. Once that's done, everybody's created it. One person will add one of their long-term goals and put it right in the middle and say it out loud. A long-term goal, I'm thinking a success or a long-term goal is this. And once that's done, you'll ask everybody else, hey, does anyone have anything similar to this? And so you'll start to cluster these similarities. And you keep doing that for each person. And you'll start naturally finding these different clusters, and you're finding themes and patterns. And from there, yep, that's it. There can also be anomalies or one long-term goals that are just, you know, by itself, and that's okay. But the idea is to converge these diverse ideas and thoughts about a particular topic, find themes, and then discuss, okay, are these the key things that we want to hone down on? So that's how it sort of works when it comes to, you know, especially on day one, these different topics we'll go through. So that's long-term goals. And the outcome here is having a clear direction on one or two, three things that we want to I guess achieve. Next, you're going to be looking at fears, and you're doing the exact same exercise or method to be able to capture all the things that people fear about this particular challenge. You know, what would cause this thing to fail? What are the things that will prevent us from achieving our goals? You want to identify these risks early. So fears are basically, this exercise of going through the fears is basically risk mitigation. And if you identify these things from the different perspectives of the participants that you have, you'll be able to cover a lot more ground. And in the end, when you do voting on some of these things, if you choose to, right, you're voting on the highest risk factor that we need to mitigate early before moving forward. So yeah, that's fears. And then we'll move on to assumptions. So we've got our long-term goals. We think that these are the things that will stop us from achieving them. What do we think we know? So that's the assumptions. Like, what assumptions do we have right now that we think we know about this challenge that we're solving? And this is probably my favorite part of the whole sprint, because when you get these different perspectives in the room and everybody's jotting down their own assumptions individually, when you come to converge, like, there's a high chance that maybe some of these assumptions will get resolved right then and there, because engineering might come in and be like, no, actually that's possible to do, and we can do that. Cool, awesome, the assumption is gone, and now we have a clear answer about what it is that we can do about this particular thing. It makes it super effective when doing a sprint and when doing these assumption exercises is having multiple disciplines in there, multiple perspectives, and you really clear up some of these things very, very early on before you even ideate, which is awesome. If you're voting on specific items in this particular activity, make sure you vote on the riskiest assumptions to validate. So if you were to prioritize all these assumptions and what you need to do, vote on the riskiest assumptions that you think that you need to validate early. And then lastly, it's all about questions. So This comes hand in hand with assumptions. Like, I assume this thing, and then it triggers off to another question naturally if you don't know what that is. So this is all about, what do we need to find out right now that we don't know and we need answers to? What are the most urgent questions we need to know now to be able to progress moving forward? So that's your fears, assumptions, fears, long-term goals, fears, questions, and assumptions segment of day one. Now, I touched on empathy maps earlier because sometimes it helps to hone down and understand who you're creating this for. Now, it's really cool to use an empathy map to be able to build out and learn about our users. Now, this can actually be done super collaboratively, and sometimes there's gonna be one person that's gonna lead the exercise because they know a lot more about the user. An example could be a customer success manager or a salesperson, or even someone that spent time a lot with these users on a day-to-day basis, like a subject matter expert, and has gone through what they've gone through. They'll be able to fill these out. And the cool thing about doing this is other people will learn about, and you're actually getting empathy and understanding based on the knowledge that's being shared. So if we just quickly go through some of the things that you'll get out from doing an empathy map, you're learning about who they are, what their context is, the user and what their context is. What do they actually need to do? What's important to them? What's their job to be done? What do they see? So the next one. What do they see and what do they hear on a day-to-day basis? Well, I mean, what do they say on a day-to-day basis? What do they actually do that apart from what they need to do? Yep, and if we keep going, we've got what do they hear, and also, yeah, so what are their pains and gains? This is probably from my perspective the most important part of the empathy maps. And so, yeah, that will be sort of day one. This is what it looks like when it's all filled out. You've got your team adding in these sticky notes and these the bits of information of where it goes, and it sort of structures and organizes your information. And this, by the way, always gets referred back to whenever you're looking at creating a solution. Be like, oh yeah, what's important to them again? And because everything's all in the same whiteboard, these artifacts are so easily accessible. So that's day one.
Cool. So awesome. So now that day one is over and moving on to day two, the first exercise, well, so imagine this. People come in for day two, they've already set a lot of the foundation up through the long-term goals, the fears, the assumptions, the questions. So one of the main things you do when people come back for day two, especially online, and we even do that even if you're in person, is review all the artifacts that is created as a refresher. And then now it's time to move on to user journeys. So pretty much user journeys is a process where we live out what a user goes through. And why we do it is because a lot of times the people that come to these workshops are not really in tune with what users do on a day-to-day basis, right? Some do, some don't. Some could have been users years ago, but are high up now that they can't remember what it used to be like. There are some participants who are experts in like particular sections of these journeys. So it's important as a team to lay out what a user goes through, and this will help build understanding and knowledge, and share that knowledge and build and empathize with the user. So if we look at an example of a user journey, so if we build one out together, and the one we decided to go with is something I think we all can relate to, or something we've all been through before, which is a coffee ordering experience, right? So if you think about it, so based on the empathy maps that were created the day before, you could have identified key users. But step one is to know which users we want to focus on for this sprint. So in this case, if we're going through a coffee ordering experience, there are three main players. For example, we have the, say, city employee, we've got the cashier that takes in all the orders, and we've got the barista. With that, we go, okay, for the sprint, who do we want to focus on? And in this case, let's say we're going to focus on the city employee. The next part is determining the end part of this journey. Okay, so there could be several ends. One end could be receiving your coffee. It could be getting to the shop. One could be ordering. So it all comes down to where do you think that journey really ends? So in this case, it's receiving your coffee. So now you have your start point, you have your end point, and now you have some gaps in the middle, right? So as a team, it's time to collaboratively work through this, and so that everyone can share and understand how do we fill out this journey together. So in this case, we have the city employee. They get to work and set up. They walk to their favorite coffee shop. They wait in line. They order coffee and pay. They wait for the coffee, and then they receive their coffee. So now that we have an established journey, we all need to make sure that we all agree on this and we're happy with it, and that's what we're going to roll with. So the next step is, okay, during that journey, how do we identify as many pain points as we can? So individually, and this is what Hunt was talking about through the convergent divergent thinking, is that outside the board that you're working online, is individually, say in like 5 minutes, you write down as many pain points that you can think of. And so, for example, everyone will go up and write their own little bits and pain points of what bothers them. And then we'll come in and start linking them to what part of the journey this is related to. And we'll do it the same way Hunt was mentioning before, where one person will drag one post-it in, and whoever has similar themes or similar post-its will start bundling up or clustering it up together. So if we go over to the next one, you'll see here that we have one pain point around walk to your favorite coffee shop. So one person said, it's way too far, but I love it, so I'm gonna walk, but it's way too far. The other one is waiting in line. So you can see there's quite a few pain points there. So waiting in line can be draining, I hate waiting and all that sort of stuff. And then there's receiving your coffee. So the order was wrong, the coffee was burnt, the milk was too hot. But the thing is about bundling up this way is that you can start seeing clear distinctions of where a lot of the pain points actually are. So once we identify that, we move on to my favorite exercise. I love this exercise called Hamaiwis, or HMW for short. And what are Hamaiwis? Hamaiwis is pretty much your transition into ideation. We've come up with long-term goals with fears, assumption, questions, pain points, but it's now time to rephrase them into questions to help us move into ideas. So it's actually one of the most effective ways of opening up brainstorming sessions and getting you into this ideation mode. So a few examples or a few tips on how to write successful Hamaiwis. So we'll go through some sort of guidelines. So the first one is your Hamaiwi is too specific, which is no-go. So for example, you do not want to put your solution into your Hamaiwi. So if you think about our coffee journey again, it's a specific Hamaiwi, which we shouldn't do. So how might we create an app to help people order coffee, right? So with this example, you already wrote create an app. But what if the solution is not an app? What if it's something you do at the store? What if it's something you do in line? What if you're already narrowed down your thinking that you're not even able to think about anything else? The next thing that you're trying to avoid is making it too broad. So for example, how might we change cafes? That's like, whoa, that's huge. How am I supposed to do that? It makes it too hard to change anything or think about ideas because it's way too big. It could be overwhelming. A good Hamaiwi, or the sweet spot where you want to be, is keeping it not too specific, but not too broad, like sort of that middle line where it's like, okay, how might we reduce wait times while ordering coffee? And the thing is about phrasing it this way is that, one, you can actually, by saying reduce wait times, you already have something that's measurable that you can quantify, okay, through your solution. So you can say, okay, I can create an app. I can maybe come up with a better payment system to speed up payment and make the line go faster. I can come up, so there's many solutions that can come out of this. So the way we do Hamaiwis, and again, we touch on making sure that everyone gets their opinion in, is again, in 5 minutes, people will go around their digital whiteboard, look at all the long-term goals, three soft questions, pain points, and start writing down as many Hamaiwis as they can. So they'll start by doing that. And then again, one person will bring in one Hamaiwi into the board, and then whoever has similar Hamaiwis will start putting it together. And eventually you're going to create these themes through these clusters, right? So things that come up like a payment cluster or a waiting cluster, experience, preference in coffee, entertainment. So you'll choose all these themes will start forming. So once that has done, the thing is about Hamaiwis, you can end up with 5 Hamaiwis or you can end up with hundreds of Hamaiwis. And with the sprint, we need to really focus down. We need to focus and narrow down on which Hamaiwis we really want to focus on and which one people resonate with. And this is where the power of voting comes in. So everyone has a limited amount of dots or votes, and silently around the room. And remember, and keep in mind that you have all these assets ready, good to go, right? You'll start putting down all these dots, and eventually you're going to see, okay, I can see that there's a lot of dots or votes around a particular topic, which is over here, specific how might we around waiting. So we're going to grab that how might we and be like, okay, let's start ideating on this how might we. And that's the end of day 2.
Awesome. Now moving on into day 3. So this is like the ideation into getting artifacts out. So there are a couple of exercises that comes into day 3. So the first one we'll go into is lightning demos. So what is a lightning demo? So it's essentially a exercise that is for everyone. You can do it on the spot right away, or you can even give it as an exercise beforehand if it's like spread out between days, right? So a lightning demo is like for everyone to research individually to look at the problem that they're trying to solve and to go out and look at products or services that could be an inspiration to solving the same problem that they have, right? Borrowing inspiration from different businesses. That is a good point there, like focusing on like entirely different businesses. Like how have they solved it and how can I use that for my problem as well? So there's always something that we can learn from like some of the businesses out there that they have solved this problem before. And moving on from lightning demo, we have crazy eights. What is the crazy eights? This is a pretty fun exercise. Like I really like a crazy eight exercise because what it tries to do is to put you in a time constraint, so 8 minutes, and you have to do 8 variations to solving the same problem. But there are different takes on crazy eights, right? So it could be 8 different steps to solving that challenge, or it could be just solving one particular challenge in 8 different ways. There's always a different way to solve it. And there are no crazy ideas, no stupid ideas. Like it's just a good way for you to get your ideas out there. Depending on the amount of participants that you have, like if you have 5 and a crazy 8, like you would have 40 different ideas right away. But a crazy 8 is for you to quickly generate ideas. It doesn't have to be too fleshed out yet, right? It can just be for yourself, but it is also very important that you can share this later along the way. And previously, when I spoke about during the comms to preparing paper and pen, this is where when you prefer to get your hands dirty and use a pen and just start drawing. And if someone tells you like, I can't actually draw, I can't actually sketch, and just remind them like everyone can sketch. Whatever we're seeing on the screen right now is essentially just like squares, lines, circles, and with copy. And it could just be scribbles of like text, right? Lastly, like because of like moving on into this virtual kind of whiteboard, like don't forget to upload this. So this is where like you need to have like this quick photo, like quick smartphone, like capture a photo and then upload it, making sure like everyone could view it. Where are the ideas that are coming from? Moving on to the next exercise, which is carrying on from this crazy 8, is the solution sketch. So this is the exercise where you take all the different ideas, the notes, and the inspiration from lightning demos, and you time box it to everyone to do it in 30 minutes. This is where you want to bring your idea to life, or to pitch your idea in a way, not bring your idea to life yet, pitch your idea. So you have to sketch your best idea, figure out the different details that goes into the solution that you have, and make it self-explanatory. Like what is it that the participant, like a audience looking at it, could actually understand what you're trying to convey. And also think about the copy that you use, the words that you use in this solution sketch as well, because a lot of the time when we look at any product or any service, like the copy, the words that you choose is the one that you use to communicate. So using the right copy is actually very important as well. And one pitfall to avoid is to avoid, like to remind your participants to avoid writing down ideas instead of sketching it. So when you write down an idea, it could still be very abstract. Like for example, I'm telling you this, but I don't have an artifact to show you what it might be. So it's still kind of abstract. So why it's always better like to sketch it out, even if it's just very rough. But when you reach the solution sketch, it's better like if you have fleshed out that idea. And coming up with the solution sketch with the art museum, this is where for example, if you're in person, here's where you would hang all your different solution sketches. For example, looking at this photo, you would see like all the solution sketches, like all kind of sticky taped to the wall, which is why we call it an art museum. In a virtual space, you would make sure like you upload your solution sketch, making sure like they're already there. While everyone's uploading their stuff, it's good to take a quick break. But for the facilitator, it's also good to make sure you have prepare your stationery, which is what we touched on previously. So like the sticky dots, which is used for the voting session. So this is an example from Figma. So that my team that we use in the company as well. So we use Figma. So we create components of like sticky notes, and then we would use just circles of different colors of different sizes as component to make sure everyone's using the same thing to like prepare that stationery. And once everyone's ready, like the solution sketch is uploaded, everyone's back now, you'll try to get everyone to walk through their solution one by one, have like a list of like agenda, who's going first. Make sure to time boxes as well, like 3 to 5 minutes to quickly walk through what are the ideas that you have in this solution sketch. And while the person is walking through the idea, everyone else should actually do this exercise, which is called Rosebud Thorn. Looking at this like screenshot from Miro. So using sticky notes, and if you want to tag them with Rosebud Thorns, like that's great as well. So what is a Rosebud Thorn exercise? A rose is a positive. So anything that you see like this is actually something that we haven't really thought about, or this would actually help with your campaign, like different, when we talk about the right people, like the different angles coming in, like, hey, this would actually help if we make this like a campaign sort of thing. But as an opportunity, we haven't actually tried this before. So what are the different opportunities that come from this solution sketch? And thorn, which is a negative or a challenge, commonly coming from technical constraints that we can't actually do this. Like it's good to get everyone on the same page, like even then to know that this would be a challenge, but that's okay. A challenge is okay, but how do we overcome that, right? So while the person is walking through the solution, everyone else should try to do these Rosebud Thorn exercise to make sure like we capture all those like different ideas and voices as well. And everyone would just put it on the board as well. Coming to the voting session, this is where we then get everyone to vote for the best solution moving forward, which we will be using as our baseline to map it out in our storyboarding session. So this screenshot that I have here is, I keep on saying Miro, but we don't actually have shares or anything. It's just one of the tools that we use. They actually have this built-in voting feature where you can easily just constrain it to where can people vote on, or what can they vote on. So this is just a simple voting solution for the team to decide how to move forward with this. And moving on next, we have storyboarding.
All right. Now, once you guys have a solution in mind and it's all been voted for and you're ready to put this together, usually you're storyboarding your solution. You're trying to flesh out now what this might be like. That's kind of, yeah, so it sort of looks like this here. And if we go to the next slide, Felix, if it loads.
Is it loaded yet?
Yeah, not sure. You go to the next slide. It's basically a lot about sketching. Yeah, sketching how the flow looks like, and how a user might go through and interact with the product. This can be a bit hard to do remotely. So an alternative, and there is an easier way, and it's a bit more abstract way, is story mapping. So you could take the principles of story mapping, which is basically like mapping the journey of what a user goes through when they interact with your product through sticky notes. So if we hit, yep. Cool, so if we go to our next slide. Here, so you're basically mapping your user's journey through your product. And what that looks like is you're creating these, like the analogy that's really, that's been explained really well is like a TV series. You know, you've got this, you say you've got like 12 episodes in this TV series, and each episode are these key things that make up this big story. As an example here, tying it back to the coffee app, the coffee challenge that Daniel has mentioned, we're looking at one key step there is learning the value of the app that the user would go through, getting started with the actual product. And then we've got, you know, discovering coffee shops, then ordering the first coffee, and then receiving their actual coffee. Great. Now, once the big episodes are done, you start filling in the actual scenes that happen in that episode. So with learning the value of your app, they could be onboarding with your product. With getting started, they're probably creating an account, signing in, and describing what their coffee preferences are. And then moving forward, when they're discovering coffee shops, they're seeing what coffee shops are around them, learning which ones are highly rated, and filtering those that are of the preference. Moving forward, we flesh out some of the key features here around, you know, selecting the coffee types, adding the cart, and you're doing that for each of the episodes, right? Now you sort of fleshed out what this solution might look like by, you know, looking at the key phases and the things that the user would do to interact with your product in those key phases. Now, doing it like this is actually more approachable for people that may not be comfortable drawing. And when you're doing it in Miro, like you can have ideas coming in or post-its coming in from people that are like, hey, maybe they could do this thing based off of that that solution that, you know, we voted on. Now, when you do this with your team, you might have a much larger story map. So it's around making sure that you're creating the most valuable prototype to learn and test. So in this case, which of the actual features that we've looked at will give us, that we've mapped out, which solution, parts of the solution that we mapped out will get us the most learning that we need to make that big decision. And so going to the diagram of, okay, we need to learn quickly. We need to build this prototype and learn fast and get our answers, get our big questions answered so we can go in a direction. You want to just start trimming that down. So what that looks like in the story map, once you've fleshed it out, is you're discarding some of the things that are not important. So maybe onboarding is not as important as that we need to test with customers. We don't really need to look at that right now. Maybe creating and signing up. We don't really need to look at that right now. But everything else around, you know, adding coffee preferences, yes, we do. So you can just gray it out, you can remove it, and then now you've got your structure and your backbone to start fleshing out and prototyping your solution. Cool.
Awesome. Now moving into day 4. So this is the day where we do the prototyping. So there's a lot that we can do with prototyping, but here are the few of the key things that I've listed out, which is with prototyping is making sure you're creating a prototype which is as close as possible. Sure, you're not building this in code, but it has to be as real as possible to your end product, where when people are actually using it would not feel like this is just a prototype or a fake thing. They would not feel like, hey, it's just a fake prototype, I might actually don't put too much thought into it. This is the idea behind like making sure like you're creating a prototype which is as real as possible, because you're really just testing this out with real people. And we'll touch more on this user testing in day 5. Next up, we have picking the right prototyping tool for you to do this prototype. So what you see here on the screenshot is Figma. It is one of the tools that I'm most comfortable with, most familiar with, and that is what I want you to get out from this, which is choose the tool that you're most comfortable with. If it's paper and pen, that's fine, but could be a little bit difficult with this whole remote situation, but it's still doable. Like, how would you want to prototype this out? And with this current situation of remote, like, try to use tools that allow real-time collaboration. So here are some of the tools that like some of the brands that we have here that allow real-time collaboration, that everyone on this tool could work together in the real time. As Hans was mentioning earlier, build enough just to learn. So you can have a lot of different ideas, a lot of different interactions that goes into this prototype, like some of the micro interactions. What about this thing that they might click on, which is fine. Like, it doesn't have to be all built out, because you can still remind your audience that it is still a prototype, but it has to be real enough. The last point I have with divide and conquer is essentially a lot of the time with prototyping, it lands on the designer, which is fine. But there are also different tasks that goes into this design sprint. So we only have 1 day ahead, which is essentially like, you have to make sure like your user testers are lined up. So you have recruited them, they're ready, like your reminders are sent. Also, like, what is the test script? Have we actually fleshed out what are the questions we want answered from our audience? What is the journey that we want to walk them through to get them telling us how they feel, right? So that's what I meant by dividing and conquer, like splitting up the different tasks to make sure like we work as a team moving forward. Now, finishing up with prototyping, we have the last day, day 5.
So welcome to day 5, which is pretty much the moment of truth. All the hard work that you have put together over the past few days pretty much all comes down to this moment where you're going to validate and test this prototype that you've been working on, and based on all the findings that you've gathered over the past few days. So first, we want to figure out what you want to test, right? So how do we make sure we go through and test all those features that we mentioned, right? And the best way to do that is through using the story map that Hans mentioned as a foundation. So if you go through your story map, you'll see, okay, we're going to discard these certain features. We're going to discard these certain features, but we're going to want to test feature A, B, C, and D. And how we're going to do that is by writing a scenario and a task. So for example, if we look back at our coffee ordering experience, a scenario could be, okay, we want to make sure that they can find the cafe. And you would ask the user, hey, you just downloaded the app and signed up. How would you go about finding your preferred cafe? And you just sit back and observe and go this. And I know we're talking about doing this online. And honestly, there's so many ways we can do this. One, you can send them a link. You can prototype this up, say on InVision. You can do it on Figma. So there's all the prototyping tools that that Felix mentioned. You can use that. Share a clickable, share the prototype, which would be like a clickable prototype they can interact with. And you can ask them to share their Zoom link, and you can observe what they're doing. You can ask your scenarios and your tasks and observe them do this. If it's on desktop, that's even easier. Again, you can do a Zoom session, you can share screens, you can do it on any call, as long as you can observe them, go through it, and you can pick up on all the things that they're talking about. Most importantly, when you're writing down your scenarios and your tasks, you don't want to lead them on. Like, hey, I want you to click here to find your cafe. No, you have to keep it generic enough and watch them go through that journey on their own, and try to make sure that they can, and try to make sure that they figure it out. Let them try to figure it out. By doing that, one, you're going to pick up on a whole bunch of usability issues. So if they can't find the cafe, you're wondering, okay, why didn't they find their cafe? Was it too hard to look for? Was the search not working? Was filtering difficult? And you're going to be picking up on all those certain little things. but make sure that as they're going through it, that they are thinking out loud. And, you know, people naturally will start going through, will kind of be quiet as they're going through because they're so immersed into using this product that you just gave them and trying to figure things out. But constantly remind them, because as they are speaking, they're gonna say these like random things or that kind of cross their mind, but these are the things you should pick up and try to factor it back into your design. So with the results, you're gonna pretty much end up with 3 ways to go. The first way is to, once you get your findings and you created this pattern, you're gonna iterate your design. And that pretty much means that you're gonna find all these usability issues that the user went through or the users went through and try to fix it up, and then take it back out and retest it to make sure that you have fixed those issues. The second option is to pivot. And when you get this, when you bring in your results and you present it to stakeholders and you're going through that, maybe you guys decide that, hey, this may not be the solution. So maybe doing an app is not the way to go. Why don't we focus maybe on their experience of waiting in line and do something in the cafe space, for example? So it's about bringing back those findings. And that's where when you hear users think out loud, you can capture a lot of that. And finally, you just completely stop it. And that's the whole point of a design sprint, is trying to validate your challenge, trying to validate a product, trying to validate an idea. And if it's not the way to go, then cool. You didn't just spend a whole bunch of money and time trying to develop something that's not going to work in the first place. So pretty much that's it. Like when you get to that point, and a few tips for facilitating, especially in an online space, is try to take frequent breaks. And like Felix was mentioning earlier, especially when you're working online, it takes a lot of effort to focus on a screen for a long period of time, especially in meetings and people talking. So you'll find that even if you take a 5-minute break every 45 minutes, 1 hour in a 6-7 hour day workshop online, will make a huge difference, because it will help people refocus. It will give them that energy to come back. And it honestly, it's great. The second thing is make sure that their videos are on all the time. You want to see what the reactions are. If you can't see them in person, you cannot gauge what they're doing, because they can look bored. They can look, disconnected. So make sure that the videos are on so you can gauge the room. And finally, the third tip is getting people's feelings online can be difficult. So make sure that they're engaged. And what I mean by that is make sure that your exercises cater to, make sure that everyone does their exercises, make sure that they're engaged. And what I mean by that is, if you feel like they're not sure what they're doing on the, because you can see what they're doing on the whiteboard, make sure that they're doing their exercises, they're writing down their ideas, and they're actually speaking, and everyone gets their turn to speak. By keeping everyone engaged, they'll be switched on, and the more benefit you'll get out of the workshop. So pretty much in summary, running a design sprint is not something that should be done only in person. And it's just something that we should continue doing even after this whole COVID is over, because the benefits you can get out of running an online workshops is great. I'm not trying to discredit in person, that's also great, but online should also be a key factor and should be something you should push for. So that's pretty much it. I thank you guys so much. And that's the 5 days, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you guys for sticking around. I know that's quite a lot of content to consume, like to take in, but yeah. Thank you, everyone. Awesome. We actually are moving into our Q&A session. So if you have any questions, we're going to come back into this Slido application. So the event code UXBNE. If you have any questions, we'll then answer them. Cool. So moving into this Slido. So
would it be worth sharing what that Slido looks like?
Yeah, let's do that.
We'll play some music as well in the back. To break up some.
Yes, boss.
Just to break up some. Some vibes up in here.
Yeah. Let's do this. Everyone hearing some music?
Yeah.
Let's do this. Awesome. So first question we have here. What are some of the favorite warm-up exercises in the workshops? Hans, you want to go?
To be honest, my favorite one is that superhero exercise. Like I said, like when you have this mindset of anything is possible, and when you do that in a simple icebreaker, that sort of carries on to, okay, what else is possible? You know, what else can we think about? And like maybe subconsciously you'll start to open up that field of view and start to think a bit farther, a bit wider. Another one is like mind maps, but it's a bit time consuming to do remotely. So what do you think, Dan, or anyone else? Yeah, Dan.
My favorite one, honestly, my go-to is the superhero. I actually find that amazing because, especially doing it online, when one part of the exercise is asking people to sketch out what their superhero would look like on a post-it, even if it's physically, and then uploading it onto the whiteboard. So when they do that, that's like kind of the first step into sketching, and sketching out and uploading onto the tool. So it's kind of like a win-win, and it's an exercise. It can help them get used to these tools. So honestly, my go-to is always the superhero, and there's always good laughs with that as well. Like people come up with the craziest stuff.
Yeah, I got one as well for warm-up exercises, which is called 30 circles. So like I mentioned in one of my slides, 30 circles is exactly what it sounds. 30 different circles, blank circles. The idea is to boost creativity. So getting everyone to have this blank paper with 30 circles in there. And the objective is to fill out these circles as much as possible within 3 minutes with everyday objects. So the idea here is like how have people interacted like with these circles? Like did they actually just draw different objects, or did they actually link them together? Like definitely Google out like 30 circles. Like they have a pretty good write-up from IDEO on this exercise. Awesome. Great question. Moving on next. So if you're creating massive whiteboards with heaps of activities on there, do you start to get lag further into the sprint, especially using video call too? From Callum, do you mind clarifying what you mean by lag? Is it like a latency lag, or is Callum there?
Yeah, I think it's that lag. I've definitely experienced where, you've got so many artifacts, and especially when you've got high res photos of your sketches being uploaded, how do you mitigate like this? Yeah, I experienced it in Miro, definitely. You could probably, one thing to do is to create different boards for different days. You know what I mean? So day one could be a separate link. In Miro, I'm talking about Miro in this case, can be a separate like board just for day one, and then day two is totally different. You give links based on the day that you're doing, and that keeps it a little bit more like broken up to reduce this lag time. I guess I think that's what that is.
Yeah, breaking up the boards could be a good idea as well.
Just to note, by the way, if you guys are looking at Slido, you can vote for some of these questions to be pushed up, and then we can answer them. And a really, really good one that I can see here is that, should software developers and web architects be involved? And absolutely, 100%, 110,000%.
1,000%, mate.
10 million%. Like, I love having software devs and engineers and solution architects in design sprints, because like, especially that assumption exercise that I spoke about. A lot of maybe, business people or a business analyst or even designers come in and we think, nah, man, that can't be done. Or maybe that's too far-fetched and out of reach for us to actually explore. And you've got your tech lead going, no, we can do that. And I've seen an API that we can just, and start putting a prototype together. And boom, like your possibilities and ideas just open wide. and everybody gets super excited and super engaged. And the next thing you know, like this like collaborative cohesion between all these different disciplines start coming together to solve this one big problem as a small unit in a short amount of time. So absolutely love having devs in there. And not just devs, you know what I mean, right? Like other disciplines, like customer success team, salespeople. Like we've had salespeople talk to us about the potential market. If you are looking to expand to a new market, they've spoken to a lot of these different customers and what's important to them, and sharing that knowledge within the team to come up with, you know, some sort of solution to growth, you know, to growth hack this particular product is a great way to get into it. Sorry.
No, man. Oh, good. Good question. Where can we get a copy of the presentation slides today? So we'll definitely make it available later after this session. Yeah. We will post this in the meetup event. Cool. Okay, moving on. Where do you find that things get out of control typically?
So in my opinion, where things get out of control is when you have someone who tends to, especially in open, okay, let me rephrase that. Things get out of control when people tend to fall into that rabbit hole of a discussion and they can't get their headspace out of that. So you end up discussion over discussion over discussion and there's no agreement. And this is where, when Hans was mentioning about that convergent divergent thinking really comes in, because when people fall into these discussions, it's because people feel that they're not getting their opinions heard and they're not getting the ideas out there. So by getting everyone to actually list out all their thoughts and then we come in and join it up together, that's where you can avoid a lot of that out of control moments, because discussions can get really, really heated.
100%. Like one thing I would also mention here, so if you're joining, like if you're facilitating this design sprint, it will be best to stop. It is kind of like your role as a facilitator to stop this discussion from going into a rabbit hole, stop them, put a pin on it and come back to it in the future time, or just listen, like make sure that it's noted down that you will come back to it in the future. If it doesn't actually help you move forward with that design sprint, it is crucial for you as a facilitator to stop that and bring everyone back to the discussion as a whole. Yeah. Awesome. All right, one question here. What if I'm the only designer, small company, but I'm facilitating the sprint? Is this a follow-up question on the previous question?
I love this question because like there are so many designers where they're the only designer in there, and and like I guess that your role as a designer, as you evolve, in my opinion, is to actually become the facilitator of information and ideas. Like when you're running if you're the only designer and you're running a design sprint, treat it as treat it as a learning opportunity where sure, you may not be, you know, getting or creating at that point in time when doing the sprint, but you're actually learning and getting perspectives from all the different participants as you run those exercises. So from there, when all the artifacts and all the learning that you've gained through facilitating, you can take that. You basically leveled up your learning because you facilitated. And now you go, okay, what can I do with all these ideas that I myself wouldn't have been able to come up with? What do I do with all these long-term goals, fears, assumptions, and questions, and prioritize my constraints? You know what I mean? And that way, when you see it like that, you go, I've got all these different pieces I can build now to progress and move forward, to come up with even more ideas to solve this problem and realize it. So you can see now that as a facilitator or as a designer, you're facilitating not only the workshop, but you're facilitating the realization of the thoughts and ideas and the solutions to bring it about to life. And that's where I think designers, you know, in my opinion anyway, it is a sweet spot. You are essentially speaking several languages, or having the ability to speak several languages: business, tech, marketing, or users, and your synthesis of all the information to be able to come up and provide that. So it's actually super 100% great. Yeah.
Oh, awesome. Alrighty. What's typically the next step after the sprint is finished? This got 5 thumbs up. Great question.
I think
D,
Dan
you want to
touched on
take this? Yeah.
What?
What's typically the next step after the sprint is finished?
All right. Okay. So there's a few things that could happen there. So like we touched on earlier, there's a few ways you can go. One is, okay, we've got really good results from this, and we want to proceed, right? So for example, you only in your design sprint, you're only focusing on a specific part of that challenge, right? Say you validated that concept and you're actually happy and you presented the results to your stakeholders and everyone's like, perfect, this is great, we're happy with this, let's proceed. This is where you can keep going and actually flesh out most of the ideas. Because usually in the sprint, you're going to test out one section of it, but you want to keep going and evolving it. So some of the next steps would be, you could look into researching specific things a little bit more. You can look into fleshing out more of these concepts and ideas from this challenge that you wanted to do. And you can keep expanding on that and actually turning it into a real product, right? And this is where you can work with your teams to actually make it happen. And like we were saying earlier, having your dev team in there and your BAs and stuff will add a lot of value into making sure this turns from just concept into reality. A lot of times with sprints, it just stops there and it dies, but you don't want that to happen. If it's something and it's valid there, you actually want to turn it into something tangible. The other one would be, okay, this, like, we didn't get really good results from this and it's a learning opportunity. So is there a spin-off that we can do from this to help improve this idea, or help take it to a next level, or try something different? And that's where you can come up with different concepts and ideas and pivot on that direction. And the third one was actually be like, no, this is not working out. We should focus our efforts on something else. And
Yeah, I think I just want to touch on that.
Yeah.
Like, remembering that doing a sprint is all about learning fast, right? Without spending too much in the beginning. If you didn't do it, you would have spent a lot building it and getting resources to actually develop it before it goes in front of the customers. And then you learn. Like, you're short circuiting this idea that you have, creating the surface layer of how real it actually could look like without building it, and then testing it. When you learn fast, you succeed fast. And that's that idea of why you do design sprints. It's getting you to ask the questions that you would not normally have if you didn't build it out and actually putting a prototype together.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Now we got one from Michael Dorcom. That's a very familiar name. How do you choose who to involve in these activities? What are the different roles, skill sets? And is there a magic number for the number of participants? How many is too many?
Who wants to take this one?
I just have a quick take on this, right? To be honest, it depends on the number of facilitators you have there. So honestly, and depends on who you're doing the sprint with, right? So you can have it in groups where a lot of people want to be involved, but if you have a good number of facilitators, it can actually be split into 2 groups into one big room. And we've done that, right? So honestly, it depends, but you want to make sure that the team that you've got in your like, say your squad, for example, like your little facility, like as a facilitator, you want the variety of people you have to cover different aspects, so that, or different departments, so that when you're getting your results, it is good. So for example, you're asking about the skill sets. Ideally, you want someone who knows the users really well in there, or even a user if possible. You know what I mean? You want to have devs in there. You want a business analyst in there. You want a product owner, if there is one at this stage. you want someone who's probably who have a lot of domain expertise, for example, in that area. So you want a range of people, and again, it depends from company to company, and depends on the sprint that you're doing. So sometimes marketing is the focus, sometimes product's the focus, sometimes as like service design, like you're working in a physical space, for example, is the focus. You know what I mean? So it honestly depends, but the more variety you can get in that room and the people, the better outcomes you're going to get.
Mhm. Righty.
But per actually, so before I forget, you want maybe 6 to 8 people per.
Yeah.
Should have mentioned that.
Yes, that's that
Yeah.
magic number. Anything
Yeah.
more than that, you want to start splitting and breaking apart. And then
Mhm.
you can even, as one facilitator, sort of facilitate 2 teams if you're, you know, if you're prepped well. But yeah, like what Danny mentioned about 6.
Mhm.
And to add to that, I think there's a lot of advantages, especially if you have a bigger number of people of doing it online, especially with the capturing and recording. Because if you're doing it in person and you're the only facilitator, trust you're gonna miss something. Trust. So
And you're running around like headless chicken trying to make sure
exactly.
everyone's all good.
Yeah.
You'd be more focused on
Yeah.
facilitating than actually gathering insights.
Yeah.
Yep. Cool. Cool. Awesome. Well, we're just gonna take on like probably 2 more questions, and then we'll wrap it up.
Cool.
Yeah. So one from Dean: does the method change when you're dealing with startup founders with a small team versus enterprise customers with a captive staff and customer base? I think Hans, like, you'll be a great
Yeah.
candidate for this question, like coming from
Yeah.
enterprise and also startup.
So I like to see design sprints as not a recipe, right? Like it really depends on the problem you're solving. And in a way, you can apply the same structure that you have with the startup founders and with your enterprise customers. Actually, in this case, you know, for us, we use the design sprint to, you know, co-design with our users and also co-design with our executive leaders. And when you've got these 2 perspectives that are done in 2 different sessions, you merge the data together and you see alignment or misalignment with what the leaders are looking into when it comes to business and what the actual customers are actually looking for. And then you start synthesizing. But like it doesn't have to change. They can be applied for both is the short answer, but you shouldn't really look at this as a recipe. Cater the methods and the activities based on the problem you're solving, the outcomes you're trying to get, and also the resources that you might have on hand to be able to do this. That's a long one. That's a long one. We're actually discussing whether or not to touch on this when we were putting the slide together. And it's actually a totally different topic that it's like a little bit more advanced where you can make design sprints work for you. It doesn't have to be 5 days. It can be 3, it can be 1. And depending on what you want to get out of it, you can take these little methods and go, okay, we're going to use this for this. We're going to use this for that whenever we encounter this thing. Now you've got a playbook of what these different design sprints might do for you, specifically for your organization. A really cool example is Home Depot and how they've catered it for themselves. So yeah, you can check that out.
Check out Home Depot, customizing the design sprint process.
Right.
Awesome. Probably a last question. Let's go. How do I persuade the client that this is a necessary time sink, especially when requiring key people like CEO, marketing heads, etc.? What about budget? How do I persuade them?
Okay, I've got some experience in this. I remember, okay, I'm happy to answer this one if you guys are okay with it.
Yeah, go ahead.
All right. I'm just gonna give you a scenario that happened and it really helped. If you can quantify the amount of time spent in individual meetings and compare it to how much time it will take in workshops, the difference is night and day. So I remember, and this is just a personal experience, a personal story, but I remember working in an organization where So where some guy came up to me and he's been trying to work on this project for months. He said, I talked to 20 people and we spent like over like 100 hours trying to figure this thing out. And we got nowhere because it was like what's that game where someone says something and then it gets translated into something else?
Chinese whispers.
Chinese
Or
whispers.
something like that.
And that's what happened through emails and just people talking to each other without all being in the same room, right? But then when we actually put a value on saying, hey, listen, you actually spent 100 hours plus with individual people trying to get all this stuff together, like trying to understand this concept and trying to get this thing happening, you would have actually saved up a lot more, okay, getting these people in the room for even, you don't have to do 5 days like Hans was mentioning earlier. It can literally be a day, all right? But if you can, if you remember at the beginning of the talk saying, understand what the challenge is and what outcome you want. And if you can say, this is what we want to achieve by the end of it, this is the amount of time it's going to take compared to spending X amount of hours trying to do it individually, that usually you'll get a better response, especially if they know that there's an outcome.
Yeah. And just tie it back to mitigating risk. And that's exactly what you're doing with doing a design sprint. Without heavily investing on something early up and upfront, without data or without seeing whether or not we've covered all bases when it comes to our assumptions and our questions. And we're just going on and saying, okay, we've got this idea, let's go ahead and build it. Like touching on, hey, do we know for sure whether or not this is a good investment and why? And what assumptions do we have? That in itself will go, okay, cool, wait, hold on. Maybe we do need a sprint to make sure we, circumvent and just test if this is worth the investment. You go from there. Yeah.
Thank you, Andrew, for that question. I guess probably just getting like a feel from the room. Like, do we want to keep on going with these Q&As or like everyone cool with that? We were just talking about like wrapping up earlier, but so yeah.
Yeah. All right, I think we might be done.
Yes, please.
Oh,
thanks for answering the question. Looking forward to the next meeting. Yep, awesome.
Okay, beautiful. I think
cool.
we'll wrap up there.
Yeah.
All right. Awesome. Well, yeah. Go ahead, Fifi.
No, I'm good.
Okay. Well, I guess, yeah, big thank you to everyone. Now, I mentioned earlier today, while we were hanging out, that there are a few events that are coming up. And I want to talk about, just quickly, talk about this, which is 24 hours of UX. So we're part of UX Brisbane is now part of this big event where we're coming together with all these other UX groups, like grassroots UX groups around the world. And we're gonna look at doing this 24 hours of UX. So starting from New Zealand all the way going down to USA, we'll be part of presenting and giving out some content all about UX. So the organizers are from Geneva and they hit us up, be like, hey, do you want to be part of this? We're like, hell yeah, we do. And so look out for this event. It's going to be around early June. They're looking at speakers from Lean UX and all this stuff. But if there's anyone that's interested to talk, let us know. We'll give out most of some of the details in a bit once it starts to get finalized. And that's about it, I guess. Big thank you to everyone that came around. Super awesome. And we'll see you guys on the next one, I guess. Reach out if there's anything that you need from us or if there's anything that we can help with. We'll be around. We're going to start opening up our social channels soon. LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter. Look out for those as we build these through, and we can go from there. Outro music. Awesome. DJ. No, I'm just playing.
What is the outro music?
Yeah.
All good.
We'll stick around anyway until everybody rolls out.
Yeah.
But if you want to roll, that's all cool too.
Yeah.
You want to
actually,
you want to chill?
I'd like to get back to that question. Like, someone PM'd me for one particular question, which is, how do you suggest we run design sprints? Wait, finding it. How do you suggest? Yep, this one. When the app is huge. But this one particular question that was requested.
When the app is huge. Oh man.
When the app is huge and then there's a lot of features to the platform. Oh my gosh, I'm having the same problem as well. Please, someone answer it for me.
To be
Or
honest,
tell me the answer.
so from my point of view, it's like, what is the riskiest thing right now? You know what I mean? Like, what questions do we need to urgently find out, and what is the riskiest thing that we need to validate? And with our assumptions, it's going back to that top day one, long-term goals for assumptions questions. We do these convergent, divergent thinking, and also a voting to prioritize from different perspectives what the most important thing to do is and what to focus on. If you take that and go, if our next and most urgent question is this thing, does our prototype and the features that we're looking to build out meet that right now? And if everything else doesn't sort of help answer that question, then get rid of it for now. You know what I'm saying? And it ties back to journey maps as well. So you've got this big app that you think you want to put together and prototype. You only got, sort of one day to put it together. Now, you've done the journey mapping, you've gone through the pain points. Where in that touch point, or in that journey map, has the most thorns, has the most red stickies? All right, it's this touch point in that journey. Okay, great. Let's extract that and go, all right, if we do how might we, like what Danny said, and voted on those to solve that one particular touch point. Now our prototype should only just be addressing that touch point. You feel me? Like, you shouldn't be trying to build the whole thing right now. You don't the design sprint is created to make time at work more efficient and meaningful. And if collectively as a team, you're voting and putting your perspectives of what you think is valuable at that point in time with the information that we have, it should be making it even easier to hone down on what it is that needs to be done right now. And so that prototype needs to cater for that. And then you touch on the other touch point on the next one, and then on the next one. And you start piecing these puzzles together as you learn faster. So that's my take on that.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. Yeah, I just wanted to come back to this question because of PM there. Oh, cool. Awesome.
All right.
Some outro music.
So we're just kicking it and chilling.